Welcome to another episode of Electable. I'm Deb Chubb, and our podcast is sponsored by the Indiana Women's Action Movement. Today, we are very lucky to be joined by two legislators in the Indiana State House, and we're very excited. They got elected in 2020, and it was just a joy to get to know them both, working with them through 25 Women for 2020, and really watching them just do outstanding work at the State House. So I want to introduce first State Representative Maureen Bauer from House District 6.
Hello.
And Shelli Yoder from Senate District 40. So today, what we want to talk about is the 2022 legislative session coming up. So we want to talk about what we're going to see, what you are going to be spearheading in the legislature, and what's going to be really scary. So Maureen, let's start with you. So tell us what bills you are working on and you want to introduce in 2022.
Sure, we're in a short session, and in the House, we're limited to 5 bills. And so that was a challenge because in my first term, there's a lot of ideas that I have and that are issues that are important to my district. And many people have come up to me and have some important ideas they want to see changed or improved or made law. So I will be addressing, bringing back one bill I filed last session to address toxic chemical exposure while on the job for our firefighters. So doing some blood testing for PFAS, which is an emerging toxic chemical that accumulates in your blood and in the environment. A few years ago, in Indiana, we banned firefighting foam because of its toxicity and impact to human health. And so now I think it's time to remedy the health impact of that chemical to individuals, especially firefighters and those who put their life on the line at their job every day. So I'm really excited about that bill and the bipartisan support around it and seeing that move forward. I'm also introducing a bill similar to a bill I filed last session about medical screenings for incarcerated women. I think that is an issue across the state. When you're incarcerated, you're under the care of the state or the county, and we need to ensure that that medical treatment that you get is high level treatment, not just the minimum. So this bill will have healthcare screenings for cervical and breast cancer, and it'll also codify DOC policy for when you're released. You will have access to your ID, birth certificate, social security card, and sign up for Medicaid. So it's something that's already done, but we hear some stories about that not happening. So it's also to help with that reentry process, which can be a bit challenging. Another bill I'm excited about is a parental bereavement leave bill, kind of on the same lines of maternal and infant health. 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, and not everyone has bereavement leave through their employer. So this would establish some time off to grieve, to seek out medical care, and really ensure that we're taking care of our health and our mental health as well in times of tragedy. And then the last one I'm excited about is a land bank bill, which was also introduced last year. It has some support in the Senate and the House, bipartisan, and we're just adjusting the language a little bit to make some clarifications to code. And this is an important bill to address some vacant lots in the cities or towns. We have one in Evansville, Muncie, South Bend has the opportunity to have land banks. So this kind of makes it a little more accessible across the state.
So what is a land bank?
So a land bank, it allows vacant properties or abandoned properties to be taken over to infill. So it addresses problems of vacant lots or abandoned lots. It addresses housing instability. So we have a very big shortage of affordable homes and housing. And also the building industry is not able to build enough homes to keep up with this shortage of stock. So it has a wide range of support to address many of those issues. It's kind of, I like to think of it as building up instead of building out. So if we go into my community of South Bend, if we have some homes that maybe were demolished or are now just a vacant lot, it allows the opportunity for that property to come under new ownership and to create new opportunities for home ownership. So it's really a win-win for the building industry, for cities and towns who have those vacant or abandoned lots that they want to address, and then to increase access to affordable housing options.
Well, that's excellent. I know in Gary, they worked on that a lot, where they had so many, abandoned houses, but it sounds like it's really something to really facilitate, repurposing, abandoned and impacted land, which of course is great because it means you're not, cutting down a bunch of trees to build a new house. Instead, you're using property that's already impacted.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right, that's great. Okay, so Shelli, tell us about what you're thinking of working on, what you're working on now, what you want to introduce in 2022, and and how you feel about that getting passed.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and I'm focusing on several issues, but primarily childcare, food insecurity, and housing insecurity. So childcare insecurity, we can call it that, because we know that Indiana has many childcare deserts, and I am in the process of filing legislation that would follow the monies that we're receiving, whether it's through the American Rescue Plan or it's going to be the Build Back Better bill that will pass. I'm very hopeful. But those monies that we are receiving in the state of Indiana, earmarked for child care, first, we're going to define childcare deserts, and then we're going to follow in a longitudinal study those dollars across time and how they're going to impact positively in the state of Indiana, because we know that money that's invested in childcare and or early childhood education has such a positive return on investment. But if we don't have the data, we can't continue to support it. So my legislation is just asking FSSA to create a longitudinal study to follow that money so we can have the data to show the immense positive impact that funding and supporting childcare in the state of Indiana has. And food insecurity, I'm filing a bill working with people in my district in making sure that farmers markets who are serving Hoosiers throughout Indiana, that they accept WIC, SNAP vouchers. That's a win-win for Hoosier farmers and for so many who might live in a food desert, but perhaps they have access to a farmer's market and they are using SNAP and WIC. We want to be able to get healthy food, nutritious food into the bellies of all Hoosiers. And then the next is housing insecurity. And I really appreciate Maureen's work in land banks. The legislation that I'm working on is eviction expungement, as well as access to screening reports for tenants, and capping application fees for those who are using a housing voucher, that those fees to apply are capped, and if they are turned down, that money is returned to those applicants. We certainly don't want to have applying for a house or an apartment to be an impediment for so many of our Hoosiers who are using perhaps a housing voucher. And sometimes these fees are really difficult to manage. And then maybe there's just one unit that's available, and there are 20 people who are applying, and then those 19 are out that money. So we want to make sure we get those dollars back into the pockets of Hoosiers. And then I'm going to be refiling my net metering bill. We want to make sure that Hoosiers, we have a gig economy in so many different ways in Indiana, and we need to have net metering. This is not, it has become partisan, but it is a nonpartisan issue. We want to make sure that we are permitting and allowing net metering. It's such a positive win-win for the state of Indiana and for Hoosiers, and we want to provide ways to make that feasible. But with the ending of net metering coming to a close, we need to repeal that and make sure that net meter remains available, and we are making those investments in renewable energy throughout Indiana, and for Hoosiers to be a part of that solution. Also, community gardens, I will be filing a bill to make sure that community solar gardens, that community solar is an option for people if they don't live in a home that permits solar panels to be put in, but there could be investment in in Hoosiers being able to be part of a community solar project and receive their energy in a renewable fashion using community solar gardens. And also, just looking at my little list here, I've been working with making sure that investments throughout for state employees, that we're being smart about those funds and weaning ourselves off of fossil fuels even in our investments. So that is another piece of legislation that I will be filing as well. So I'm excited about
Those are
the
great.
session starting again and working with people like Maureen in the House, but making sure that we're improving the lives of Hoosiers from our northernmost border down to our southernmost, and
Right.
east and west.
That's great. Oh, it's so comforting to know that the both of you are out there doing the work that really means, something to so many people's lives. So, okay, now let's talk about bills that you think might be coming out or that you've seen proposed by Republicans, where you think there might be some ability to work together with Republicans. Anything, Maureen, bills that you think, oh, this is going to be a totally bipartisan bill?
Well, I think our land bank bill would be that way. I'm hopeful that it
Excellent.
will be. Yes.
Excellent.
And the same with the PFAS blood testing. So we've had some conversations where we have full range of support. I would say, most of the bills that pass out of the House are bipartisan. So it's
Oh,
easier to think of those ones that seem a bit more extreme and gain more headlines. But as I sit on the Agriculture and Rural Development Committee, all those bills were unanimous support, establishing urban agriculture zones. And it's encouraging to serve on that committee for that reason. So I think I'm hopeful that, again, most will be that way. So I'm not sure if I can think of any other that I would say.
so well, what about a decriminalization of marijuana? Is that going to happen?
I don't know. Shelli, is it going to happen?
Why is it
I'm
going to
not
come out of
sure.
the
We're
Senate
getting
first?
mixed messages from our governor. I know he did endorse Representative Arrington's bill to create a pathway forward, what legalization would look like in Indiana, which I think is smart. It's great. We're having the conversation. We can't just avoid it and say, no, not here. Even if our governor says he won't legalize cannabis with the federal restriction, having it still illegal, we can at least start the conversation, get those people in the same room and look at it from a realistic point of view.
I thought he was fairly supportive of decriminalizing possession of, at least small amounts.
I think what we're seeing is the wave of support is drowning out the naysayers, and they're seeing that throughout Indiana there is support for decriminalization. There is support, and going into another election year, there has to be conversation about this, because the majority of Hoosiers are ready to move forward with our neighboring states to set up a system. And I know Representative Arrington has language, and I'm so glad to see it. And we need to come to the table, as Representative Bauer said, and begin to, what can the guardrails be? What kind of system can we set up for Indiana? But the reason why we're talking about it is because it is popular, because they know that the polls, the numbers are there to begin moving in this direction for the state of Indiana. But whether or not we will see any real progress, I guess we'll have to wait. And one of the challenges, Deb, really is we haven't seen any legislation that's been filed. So we don't know what could be bipartisan. The only thing that we're privy to is what we're filing. The one bill that's been filed so far is HB 1001, and that is the vaccine mandate. And we're going to be hearing that in committee, I believe, tomorrow. So if your listeners, I'm not sure when this is going to be airing, but Thursday, December 16th, folks can go to the IGA website and watch that committee hearing live. And if you want to provide testimony, then that's always encouraged, no matter what what is happening. If you care about a particular piece of legislation, then if you can get yourself to the state house and testify, because that's a powerful, it's always powerful to hear Hoosiers' voices. But one of the challenges that I was just mentioning is we don't know what other legislators will be filing just yet. So we're not sure what all we can get excited about other than our own legislation that we're filing.
Geez, it seems like, and then once it starts, it goes so fast. It's just,
Mhm.
you wish there were a little more transparency in all of this. So in the bill you're talking about, the mandate for vaccinations is really a mandate that does not allow businesses to require their employees to get a vaccination. And requiring businesses to honor, any exemption that's offered, any religious or health exemption that's offered without any question. So, and there has already been a lot of pushback from the Chamber of Commerce and even Governor Holcomb, who says, I don't think we should be telling businesses what to do and how to keep their staff safe. So I guess I suspect that, that's going to soften up there. And, because they brought it up, they thought they were going to do it in the one day you were there, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and then pulled it off. So when there was so much pushback. So I suspect that there's going to be a little bit of softening on that. And particularly because, of course, Indiana is, like, I don't know, the whole, at least the northern half of Indiana is in the red, positivity rates of, 20%. And, and hospitalizations at 3,000 yesterday, over 3,000 people in the hospital with COVID yesterday, higher than it's been in a year. So this is, not a good time to be saying, no, people should just, not get a vaccination, not stay safe. And, and frankly, business owners, I'm sure, are saying, I really need my staff to be there and be healthy. And I really do want them to get a vaccine. So anyway, so that's a scary one. Maureen, you look like you got something to say on
I
this.
was going to say, I do commend them for removing one section of that bill, which was about pregnancy. There was a language in that bill that stated if you were pregnant, that could be an exemption. And the vaccine is safe for pregnant people. The virus itself has taken the life of many pregnant people. And so that was a little misleading, not based in sound and science. So I'm really glad that they took that out, because that was quite dangerous. But yet, I think there's a lot of misinformation about this topic in general. But what I'm hearing from business community is that they would like to allow the option to either allow their employees to be vaccinated or do weekly testing. And so I think we have to continue to, again, have those conversations with those individuals, those businesses, and make sure that we are passing legislation that is sound and will not end up in the courts, because we spend so much money passing bad bills and then going to court. So we just have to be a bit more responsible, a bit more representative. And if you have so much opposition to a bill, let's slow it down and listen to that conversation, and maybe we'll have to start over.
One
Yeah.
concern I think that we need to keep in mind, and I've heard this loud and clear from my district, is the testing option. How will that look? How will that work? That it's incredibly expensive. If you have, if that's going to be the route you take, what I have heard is we simply won't have vaccine mandates, whether that's in the healthcare field or at schools, at in small businesses, because it's just with that language. It's how will that be implemented? How does that work? Who's paying for it? So we need to really think through those aspects of that language, because I have heard some real concern about that portion of how it's written right now.
Right, because this bill, as it's presented, requires the businesses to pay for testing. If they allow that, then they have to pay for it, which I'm sure businesses also are, shirking. No, don't
Well,
want to do it.
pay for it, implement it,
Right, right.
run it.
Yeah.
Where are they going to get these tests? How frequently? Uh, yes, so many issues that we need to work through about that, if that's going to be included.
So I am lucky because I work with people all over the state, and I have seen some of the surveys coming from in Republican districts coming to voters, and the questions that they're asking are, intended to, get a feel for how their constituents feel about issues that they want to pursue. And of course, one of them was the CRT, which was in the survey, misinformation. It said, how do you feel about banning CRT, which is a curriculum that says that races should be treated differently because of past discrimination. And so that's coming out. And so I don't know if that's going to happen. And as we all know, many of these Republican bills don't come from Indiana. They come from ALEC, a national organization that writes conservative legislation that they send out to all states. And that's one of them, banning CRT in the schools is one of them. And then there was another survey that went out regarding transgender students and their ability to participate in sports in school. And so I think those are the issues that, a lot of Republicans want to talk about. It feels like the level of extremism is really just getting worse and worse. And Republicans who are moderate, who are, sane, are being primaried by even more extreme Republicans. That's happening up here near me. Which is just, it's just shocking. So, and it is frightening. So I know you haven't seen any bills, but are there things that you are really worried about? And this is, it's important to talk about it now, I guess, just because we need to be ready. If there's, there was a promise by Senator Liz Brown from Fort Wayne to introduce a bill that mirrored SB 8 out of Texas, banning abortions after 6 weeks and creating this, vigilante system of enforcement. So what do you think is out there that we really need to make sure we are, getting ready for?
Yep.
Well, I failed to mention that I am working on a couple of pieces of legislation. One that trying to work out the language, but I've filed it, but we're working on the language that Hoosiers can't sue other citizens for accessing healthcare. So that's one of them.
Great.
And another one is protecting, if we're going to, if there is a possibility that there's going to be this legislation, protecting Hoosiers' personal health information from online, some portal where people can enter information that Hoosiers' private healthcare information is protected. So I have 2 of those bills, trying to anticipate some of that. That is very much a concern. So yes, I am concerned about that. We hear, I don't know about Maureen, but we hear when it's our bills, and one way that it gets stopped is, we don't have enough time, it's not a budget year, or that's currently being litigated in the courts, so we're going to let that work itself out. But that isn't always the case, because here we have, if we do hear a language like what we see in Texas or worse, then currently that's getting litigated in the courts. So why are we hearing that? So we're gonna have to wait and see. But I anticipate something. And another thing I'm worried about is the turning school board races into partisan races, that you'll have to declare Republican and or Democrat as a school board candidate. And that's just the wrong direction for Indiana.
Yeah, I sit on a school board, as you know, and so and I, there are, of my fellow school board members, I have no idea what party any of them belong to. And and I mean, well, people know me, but anyway, that means we don't worry about that. We don't talk about partisan issues. We don't pick up things that are partisan. We are really truly just focused on making sure our kids in our district get the best education and services possible. So I agree. I think that's really just the wrong direction, and it's going to be problematic.
Yeah. one
I
of
think
our
that is a problem. Go ahead.
one of our elected representatives who's a teacher, and there aren't too many left, but she said she's never heard of a parent who has approached her and said, I want more politics in the classroom. So,
Right.
the party of small government now wants to put politics in our schools. And that was an argument years ago to make the superintendent of public instruction an appointed position. And here we are again, trying to take that argument back by saying we don't need politics in our education system. And the superintendent of public instruction has been of the Republican Party for many, many years, is now appointed by a Republican governor. So if we have critical race theory in our schools, I'm not sure how we messed up that public curriculum. So, I mean, it's just not really realistic, again, of what we're talking about happening in our schools or in Indiana. The surveys, as you mentioned, are a really great way to gauge what kind of legislation we might see coming our way. One year there was a questionnaire about permitless carry, and I think the opposition to that question was about 68% were opposed to permitless carry, yet that bill came to the House floor, almost passed, and I think we might be seeing it again. And that's another bill that has overwhelming opposition, especially from law enforcement, and they've detailed how it will hurt their ability to do their job and to keep communities safe. And it's just really difficult that we have to continue to put the pressure on being representatives of the district who are there to serve. And that'll remain a challenge, but it's something where the public can really hold their elected officials accountable. And we're going to have to do that all over again in 2022, show up to give testimony, and really make your voices heard.
So, yeah. And so, Shelli, in the Senate, are there any other scary bills that were there last session that you think might come back?
I'm sure. Of course, right now, nothing is coming to mind. I can't think of anything specifically, but if you give me a second, I'm sure I will. But
There was
I
plenty, I'm sure.
I do think we can anticipate what if it's going to end up on a poll or a flyer or some kind of a survey, we'll probably see it filed.
Yeah, that's, that was my feeling. And so that's what really started me worrying. Yeah, I wonder if there will be a Republican bill just, banning CRT in schools. And you're kind of like, well, whatever, it's not there now. So although, we did have the big issue that, our clownish AG Rokita weighed in on when there was a case where someone was not allowed to have a Black Lives Matter sign in their room. And so, he had his, smart attorney staff write a memo on that, really, really trying to assert that you couldn't, that was political, and that you couldn't have any political speech. And I mean, it's a complicated constitutional discussion, just because, students don't give up their First Amendment rights when they go to school, but teachers do. Because they are state employees. So it was a complicated issue, but I certainly see that kind of activity, being molded into legislation about, political speech in schools, and trying to morph, actual American history of racism into political speech that is prohibited from being in public schools. So, this is how these things work, eventually. But
so just to go full circle, the result of extreme policy is because of gerrymandering. So
that's right.
I would call out on both parties to end gerrymandering, so you don't have to worry about getting back to town in February instead of March to run for your primary election. And so most of the opposition to 1001 has been from the very extreme right, who don't think it goes far enough. So we have its challenges of really coming to the middle road where we can create policy that serves the entire state, and again is representative of our entire Hoosiers that are living here and will end up in courts and try to be
Right.
overturned.
And that's how, you're right. You're exactly right. That's how it happens when the majority of Hoosiers are opposed to open permitless carry. It doesn't matter because those legislators can pass those laws anyway and still get reelected. And that's what makes them unaccountable, and that makes them, not in service to the people of Indiana. And that's how, yeah, you're exactly right. That's what the result of gerrymandering is. People can be extreme as they want and can pass whatever they want without any accountability and without ever having to worry
I
about
just want to
election.
say, that's right. But I just want to say, what is so scary about Black Lives Mattering? I do not, I, I think I'm just going to anticipate that we'll hear this, and I don't understand what is so scary about Black Lives Mattering.
Mm. Yeah.
That is
Right.
that's like the that's like should be the like the we should be advocating much more than that. And so what's so scary?
Instead of
We
fear, yeah.
we have I'm excited actually for the conversation. I think that you know, phrases like CRT are out there to scare people,
Mhm.
and it's an opportunity to educate people. So I ask all listeners to consider coming if those bills are going to be heard. We need you in that committee hearing. We need your testimony. We need your voices. So we'll stay in touch, Deb, and let you know when those hearings are
Excellent.
scheduled.
Excellent. Yeah. And so, yeah. And just one last thing on your point about gerrymandering is that, see, now I forgot, I got like distracted for 1 second and I lost track of it. But anyway, we'll get back to it. But I know we're almost out of time. And so I just want to thank you both so much for talking with me and, really advancing this discussion. This is so important that people know what's coming. Oh, now I remembered. So this is at my age, like at random moments, you remember. So it was the fact that I worry about laws being introduced and passed that are going to affect our elections. So, so as you were saying, the gerrymandering is one of the ways that we end up with extremists in charge that don't represent Indiana. And another way is changing the election laws to allow, Republican, now we have this Republican supermajority, to allow legislators to overturn the results of elections. And we almost saw it last time. There was a bill that said that legislators could usurp the powers, could throw people off of local election boards if they didn't like what they were doing. And that I don't think it passed because, and I'm not honestly positive because it was this tiny little piece in a very large bill. But I don't think it did. But I suspect that those will be coming back. And we all know that in many other states, those ideas have passed. And many voter suppression and election oversight bills did pass. And in Indiana, we didn't get a whole lot of that. But that's another thing that I think we have to be on the lookout for. As someone posted something on social media saying Indiana college voter turnout was increased by 20% last year. And honestly, my first reaction was, well, look for a bill that will further restrict college students' ability to vote next year. Because
I think that's been filed before.
yeah, it was. Remember, they tried to make it that, so they tried to make it so that college students in Indiana, if you wanted to vote here, you had to get a driver's license here. And then they finally, after so much outrage, allowed students to use their college, which are public schools. It's a government issued ID, photo ID, and finally allowed them to use that. But I suspect there will be more in that vein this year. So it's really tough. It's really tough staying on top of all this. So anyway, I'm so happy that we have the both of you in there doing all of this hard work. So, okay, wait. So, okay. So we are out of time. So just, any final words, Maureen, about the session? And
no, I'm really looking forward to it. Again, we're told it's a short session and there's some restrictions. We know that there will be a tax cut, or there'll be some sort of talk about tax cuts. That's one thing we didn't talk about yet. So they will be reopening the budget to adjust some of the taxes. So maybe that'll lead to more opportunities to have a more equitable tax structure in Indiana, see more relief to working families, put more disposable income into your pockets, maybe take the tax off of diapers and tampons. I don't know, but so it'll be an exciting session, that's for sure.
Excellent. All right, Shelli, any final words?
I just want to encourage all Hoosiers to stay involved and make sure that your elected leaders know where you stand on issues. I know I value hearing from people, and if that is an email, a phone call, getting yourself to the state house, that's really tough for a lot of people, but even a personal email or phone call makes a difference. So thanks to all of you who have already reached out, and I look forward to hearing from many more of you.
All right, great. All right, well, thank you both, and good luck. I'm sure we'll, talk again soon. And I hope that you will come back and do an update as the session progresses.
Absolutely.
That sounds great. Thank
All right.
you.
Okay, take care.